I was born and raised in New York, but 2 years ago, I moved out of my parents' house and started living alone in the city. If I stayed at home, I don't have to pay rent, and my mom would cook all my meals. Sure, it was easy, but I wanted to stand on my own independence. There is an apartment I chose in a spot where I could get to work on a single train line. No transfers necessary. It's a modest 4-story building with a total of 12 units. The first and second floors cater to singles. The third and fourth floors are geared towards families, and my apartment was a corner one on the second floor. That evening, right after I came back from work, my doorbell rang. Given that the building entrance is secured with an automatic lock, so I thought it must be one of my fellow residents. I'm not exactly chummy with any of them, so I wondered what they might want. When I opened the door, it was a young woman who said she'd just moved into the apartment next door. Oh, she's pretty cute. Opening the door sparked something in me. She was probably around my age. Not too skinny, not too fat, with bright, wide eyes and a quiet demeanor, she struck me as a typical, diligent office worker. Hi, I'm Mary, just moved into 202 next door. Hi, I'm James. She introduced herself, offering me a small paper bag with handles. It was a gift for her new neighbors. Some might wonder, do people in New York still do this, making courtesy visits when they move in? Of course, not everyone does. But some do, indeed. Whether or not they do it, it's up to the individual. There may be differences in first impressions, but I don't judge people based on whether they greet or not. That's the depth of tolerance you find in New York. After we exchanged a simple greeting and she left, I quickly opened the housewarming gift she had brought. Inside was a cookie shaped like a cat. A cat, but it's a cookie. I don't dislike cookies, but I don't particularly enjoy eating them either. I dislike the feeling of crumbs getting stuck in the crevices and contours of my teeth after eating. Still, I appreciated the gift and decided to save it for when I was peckish. Anyway, this new neighbor of mine and I seemed to share quite a few life patterns. Our timings coincided when taking out the trash in the morning and heading to work. Although there were several ways to get to the station, our usual paths overlapped. Our times for returning home in the evening coincided too. We even bumped into each other at the local shopping street on days off. So, we ended up having casual conversations along the way. Mary, are you by any chance a cat lover? Why would you say that? I found her overreaction strange and responded. Well, the cookies you gave me when you moved in, they were shaped like cats. Darn it, oh right. Why did I choose those, again? She looked embarrassed and gave a wry smile. On my days off from work, I would either lounge around at home, or at most, head out to the local shopping street or the neighborhood grocery store. One day, while I was waiting at a frequently crossed intersection, a large dog on a walk half stood and clung to my waist. The owner pulled the dog back and apologized to me. But I love dogs, so I was rather pleased. I bent over and gave the dog a hearty pat on its neck. Since then, I looked forward to meeting the dog on its walk at that intersection. The dog would half stand and cling to me as if it was a given when we met. I prepared dog treats, of course, with the owner's permission, and gave them to the dog. The dog would eat the treats I held in my hand. When the dog took the treats, its fluffy fur would tickle my palm. Those few minutes were moments of pure bliss for me. However, one day, Mary happened to pass by while I was frolicking with the dog at the intersection. She must have been very surprised because she was staring at me, halfway recoiling. Even when I greeted her, she remained stiff. I later learned that she wasn't particularly fond or afraid of animals, but she was scared and had a hard time with large dogs. It had been about a month since Mary moved in. That morning, as we were walking together to the station, she said, "People have been clearing their throats at me, clicking their tongues." She was talking about incidents on the escalator. She was originally from Kansas, and it was her first time living outside the Midwest. In the Midwest, when riding escalators, people stand on the right side and leave the left side open. However, in the Northeast, it's the opposite. She had heard about it, but out of habit, she stood on the right side of the escalator, which would earn her some throat clearing and tongue clicking from people behind her. Is the food taste different too? Yes, but New York has everything. Still, she was surprised by the thinness of the 8-slice bread. In the Midwest, even 6-slice bread is considered thin. Speaking of bread, there's the egg sandwich. In the Northeast, the standard is a sandwich with egg salad made from chopped boiled eggs mixed with mayonnaise, but in the Midwest, it's common to sandwich something like an omelet. There are other differences too, like local slangs, abbreviations for famous burger chains, and whether beer sizes are referred to as pint or half pint. Even though she knew these differences intellectually, experiencing them firsthand led to a series of surprises she shared somewhat bashfully. I enjoyed listening to her stories. I had never left New York except for vacations. So, I assumed that the norms in New York were the norms of America. But I imagined if I were to be transferred to the Midwest or some other region, I would be as bewildered and surprised as she is now. In retrospect, New York is an exceptional place within the country. Of the people living in New York, just over half are native New Yorkers like me. The rest are people who have moved in from other regions. People often say New Yorkers are cold, but if you're referring to people living in New York, nearly half of them are folks who have migrated from other regions. That morning, as usual, I was taking out the trash and about to head to the subway station. She, who normally appears right after me, was surprisingly late. Wondering if she had a different schedule that day, I waited for her a bit. Just then, she came running up, looking rushed. "Good morning. Did you oversleep? Did you wait for me?" she asked, looking apologetic as she disposed of her trash. "I didn't oversleep, but, Luna, I took a little time getting ready." As she said this, she brushed off her navy blue suit skirt. We then, as usual, walked side by side toward the station. I glanced at her shoulder. Numerous thin, short, white hair-like things were there. Because of the navy color, the dust was noticeable. "There's something on your shoulder," I said to her casually. She hastily brushed it off with her hand. Yeah, I was worried about dust on my clothes. That's why I was late getting out." The following weekend, after having lunch at a burger chain with the different acronym she mentioned, I was walking home through the shopping district. There she was, intently reading a flyer or something posted on a light pole. I called out to her from a short distance away. But for some reason, she ignored me and ran off. Puzzled, I watched her leave, then walked up to the pole and looked at the poster she had been engrossed in. It was a flyer for a cat adoption event. I recall her saying she was indifferent to animals. After returning to my apartment, I checked my mailbox and found, mixed in with the junk mail, a notice from the apartment management company. It stated they had received complaints about pet food pouches in the residents' trash, and they were reminding everyone that pets were prohibited in this building. This can't be about me, can it? I remembered that I had given some treats to a large dog I'd met at the crossroads and had brought the empty bag home to throw away. I guessed that someone who saw it might have contacted the management company. The bag was translucent, and I had carelessly thrown it in, so it must have been visible. I bowed my head in apology to the unknown fellow resident for the misunderstanding. However, it wasn't me who had caused a misunderstanding, nor was it someone else. Indeed, someone was keeping a pet in one of the apartments in this building. It was right after this when it came to light. As I returned to my room, I opened the window and leaned out to check the garbage bag I'd left on the balcony. As I lifted the bag, sure enough, through the bag and mixed with the other garbage, the recognizable pouch from the dog treats was plainly visible. At that moment, something caught the corner of my eye. There was a partition board between my balcony and the next rooms. At the bottom of the board, there was a gap about 4 inches high from the floor. There was something gray on the floor in front of that gap. For a moment, I thought it was a dead mouse and I jumped. Then, with trepidation, I took a closer look. Turned out, it was a mouse all right, but a small mouse stuffed animal. Did it fall from the balcony above? As I reached down to pick up the stuffed mouse, I noticed something moving in and out of the gap in the partition. What is this? It was a soft, stick-like object covered in pale fur. When I tried to get a closer look by bringing my face near, it quickly retracted, and when I gave up and pulled my face away, it came out again. It wasn't just moving in and out, either. The tip of it was beckoning, as if trying to retrieve something. I initially thought it was one stick, but it was actually two. Then I noticed the paw pads. It was a cat's paw. It probably had been playing with the mouse stuffed animal on the neighboring balcony and had accidentally pushed it onto mine. It was trying to retrieve it. I pushed the mouse stuffed animal back toward the gap at the bottom of the partition. Immediately, the cat's paw pounced and retracted, clutching the stuffed animal. Good for you, kitty, you got your toy back. For a while, I was grinning to myself, picturing the cat probably playing ecstatically with the reclaimed stuffed mouse. Then, I suddenly snapped back to reality. Next door was her apartment. Why would there be a cat in her place? All right, the dust on her navy blue suit when she came over, it was cat hair. She must have a cat, there's no doubt about it. Even though this apartment complex doesn't allow pets. This was not something I could ignore. I immediately went to visit her next door. When I rang the doorbell, she cracked open the door and peeked out. As she asked what the matter was, I shoved a notice from the management company in front of her nose. Did you see this? It was in your mailbox, wasn't it? Yes, I saw it, but she was clearly flustered. Is this your cat, perhaps, Mary? No, not at all. She was grimacing. Then why was there a cat on your balcony? I saw it, just now. Could it have been a mistake? Maybe. Her face was pale. I peered over her shoulder into the room. But there was no sign of a cat. Then it happened. She let out a little gasp and lifted one foot. I looked down at her feet. So, who's this? A cat sat at her feet, its head resting on its front paws. The cat looked up at me as if to plead not to torment her. Then, she picked up the cat and invited me into the room. When I walked further into the room, she put the cat down on the floor and headed to the kitchen to make tea. Yes, she's mine. Her name is Luna. Whiskers stayed where she was put down, sprawling on the floor. Once she made tea for me and herself, she sat down at the table, gave some fresh water to Luna next to her, and turned to me. As I took a sip of tea, Luna staggered to her feet and began to drink water too. She looked down at Luna and said, I found her when she was a kitten. I was in kindergarten at the time, so she's already 18 years old or maybe even older, a real old lady. She said they were like sisters, growing up together because she was an only child. She has lived a long life, but I wonder how many more years, or months, or weeks. No, how many more days we can be together. She was born and raised in Kansas, her hometown, graduated from a local community college, and got a job at a local company through her father's connections. But she couldn't give up her longing for New York, so she applied to a job posting by a company in New York and was luckily hired mid-career. She decided to move to New York, but had to find a place to live on her own. She sought advice from friends and searched online for housing. Finding a place was difficult, she admitted, especially without any familiarity with New York. In her apartment search, she couldn't find a place that met her requirements like location, budget, and pet friendliness. Her start date was fixed and she didn't have much time. She chose this apartment, mainly because it seemed convenient for commuting. She considered leaving her cat behind since pets were prohibited in the apartment. But you ended up bringing her anyway, not knowing how many more days you could spend together. She bowed her head at my words. As I watched her, I remembered my own childhood. My family home was in an old residential neighborhood in the heart of New York, lined with aging single-family homes. Even as a child, I could peer over the fences of our neighbors' homes. Back then, an elderly couple lived next door. They were always very kind to me. They had a dog that they kept in their yard. The dog was friendly towards me. We often played over the fence, and sometimes I even took it for walks. It was in the fall when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. The old couple next door decided to move in with their son due to their old age. I was just a kid, but I felt sad thinking about saying goodbye to the dog. And so, it was the eve of the old couple's move. Due to a typhoon, heavy rain was falling outside. The wind was so strong that the glass on the porch was shaking and making noise. I went to the porch to check the outside. Then I noticed a different noise, not from the wind, but something hitting the glass. I looked down. There, soaked to the skin, was the neighbor's dog, batting at the glass door with its paws. I quickly opened the glass door. The dog leapt out at me. It then licked my face all over. Rain mercilessly invaded the porch. My mother noticed and told me to close the glass door. Ignoring my mother's words, I took off my t-shirt and used it as a towel, wiping the wet body of the dog. No matter how much I wiped, the rain kept pouring on. Looking back now, I still wonder. How did the dog, who should have been tied to its doghouse, got free and came to me? All I know for sure is that night, that dog came to say goodbye to me. And it hurted to say goodbye to that dog. She stayed still, with her head bowed. I couldn't bring myself to blame her, and I was at a loss for what to do. Then, Luna seemed to climb onto my lap where I was sitting in the chair, twisting her upper body onto her back and rubbing her head against me. I restrained her when she hastily tried to pick up Luna. "Maybe she's telling you not to beat yourself up anymore," I said. Upon hearing this, she covered her face with both hands and broke down crying on the spot. She said she never had any intention of hiding the fact that she had a cat and staying in this apartment for a long time. However, there were plenty of things she was still trying to get used to in her workplace and in her new life in a city like New York. She said she would look for another property where she could live with her cat whenever she had the time, but with no familiarity with the area and no knowledge of average rents, she couldn't find one. If I were the landlord of this place, I thought, I might have said, "If that's the situation, I'll give you a bit of a reprieve," but I didn't think it would go that well. These days, the world tends to adhere strictly to rules, or rather, there's no room for leniency. So, I told her that it would be bad to keep Luna in a pet-prohibited apartment, but we should keep it a secret for a while. And I decided to help her look for a new apartment. However, the situation drastically changed within 3 days. It was right after I came home. The doorbell was rung persistently, as if waiting for my return. When I went to see, she was standing there, large tears streaming down her face. When I dropped my gaze slightly from her face, Luna, no longer moving, was in her arms. When I came back home, she usually comes to greet me at the entrance. I thought it was strange. And then, I found her, on the sofa. As she said this, she crumbled to the floor, crying loudly, still holding Luna in her arms. "I'm sorry, Luna, I was foolish." I searched for words to say to her, but couldn't find any. So, instead of words, I hugged her, gently rubbing her back as I did so. Several weeks after that, we started looking for a place to live together. "This place is pet-friendly," I said, having found a pet-friendly property by chance and mentioning it out of interest. "But I don't She pulled out her smartphone with a somewhat distant look in her eyes. On the lock screen of her smartphone was Luna, who looked like she was smiling gently. Looking at Luna on her phone, she turned to me and gave a wistful smile. "That's right. What about this one? Doesn't it look like a decent place?" "Indeed, it does. How did you like today's story?" Your subscriptions and likes really help motivate us in our production work. We look forward to reading your comments. Until the next video, take care.